So I wanted to turn my old Crayola markers into alcohol markers, and the results don't look too bad. Here's how I did it. What I want to do is replace the water content in the cartridge with alcohol, so I started with a relatively dry marker. First thing, I carefully removed the nib. Shoot. Okay, let's pretend that didn't happen. So relatively dry marker, and I carefully remove the nib. Oh my god. Yep, so carefully remove the nib. I found that it helps if you wiggle the barrel back and forth a little bit. And then using a syringe, I deposited 1 milliliter of alcohol into the barrel, and that gets soaked up by the cartridge inside. I used 95% ethanol rubbing alcohol, but I'm sure that isopropyl alcohol would work as well. I'm guessing the higher the percentage, the better result, but I'm no expert in this. So the second thing you're probably wondering is, why does this person in this video have such a big syringe? Where did they get that syringe? What did they get it for? Is this a bad person? Should I be watching this YouTube video? Am I going to be put on some watch list? Then I replace the nib, making sure to press it firmly down back into its place. Now a little bit about what's happening inside the barrel. So inside a marker you have the nib, and then inside you have a cartridge. When you deposit alcohol into one end of the cartridge, it leaches the pigment towards the other end, as you can see here. So to counteract that, there's a specific way in which to let the marker rest to remedy that problem. First is to leave it upright for 5 minutes to let the alcohol flow to the bottom and rehydrate all the pigment, and then upside down for 5 minutes to bring that pigment with the alcohol back towards the top, towards the nib, and then upright for 2 minutes so you don't get ink explosion everywhere when you open the cap, and then you're ready to test. And this is why you need to test it first. So here's one of my first experiments where I put in way too much alcohol, and you can just see the bewilderment through my hands of why this happened and what I'm gonna do to fix it. And then I kind of just sit there and revel in the failure and mess that I just made before trying to clean it up. I got my table all wet because the alcohol went right through the paper, but still it's not a complete lost cause because there is a solution for it, which is letting it dry. So essentially just leaving it with the cap off, but checking on it often because alcohol does evaporate very quickly and you don't want it to over dry, which is the other problem you can have. So here we see that this marker is a little bit too dry, and you can tell because it leaves these streaks, which is the exact opposite of what you want an alcohol marker to. But there's a solution to this as well, which is adding more alcohol, a few drops at a time onto the tip, and then testing it and repeating as necessary. So these are the swatches from the beginning of the video, with the regular markers on the left and the alcohol markers on the right. And I have to say they perform so much better than I expected them to, almost like actual store-bought alcohol markers. And here I'm just swatching some more of colors that I made, and to be entirely transparent, they didn't all turn out as great as those first 3 did, but they're still very impressive for just filling regular Crayola markers at home with alcohol, and they are entirely usable, and I intend to do something with them. Here I'm just swatching some more regular Crayolas to compare with the alcohol Crayolas, and you can really see how the regular Crayolas have these darker lines where 2 passes meet, whereas the alcohol Crayolas, they have this almost uniformity of pigment and color, which is what you look for in alcohol markers. So this is me just doing a little bit of blending with similar colors, the first the alcohol markers and second the regular Crayolas. There are many videos on YouTube of people making alcohol markers from Crayola markers, but I found that they either used specialty materials such as the Crayola make-your-own marker kits with alcohol ink, or those watercolor brush pens that have a cartridge for water. Either that or the markers weren't practical because they made a mess. So I decided to try to compile my own technique to making these alcohol markers that are passably functional as art supplies. And I want to give credit where credit's due to Super Ray Dizzle. From her channel, I first came across this idea of making alcohol markers from crayolas, and I also used her technique of taking off the nib and dropping the alcohol in through that way rather than taking off the back and then not being able to close it right and then it leaking absolutely everywhere. And lastly, thank you so much for watching, and I hope this video lived up to your expectations.